Hey y'all, it's Connor from Bigfoot Anonymous. I'm here with the brothers Cameron and Tristan from Hidden Relief, and they found a footprint right here in the cave. We're naming it the Alamo Druid. But right now, while we're waiting for it to dry, the casting supplies, I'm going to read a chapter from Erie Swamp's Roadtrip to Eden. It's available on Amazon. You can read along in the future. Crossing the Crybaby Bridge, Valley City, Ohio. Ohio's soil is rich with history. The Cleveland area is plagued with haunted castles, bad luck, and roads that go nowhere. The fire at the Gore Orphanage, Melonheads, and the Loveland Frogmen are just the tip of the iceberg. Down 71 South, when you leave the bright lights of downtown, you head right into the darkness, and that's where I grew up. October was always my favorite month for all scary movies and free candy. But our neighborhood had tales of real witches and pure evil that kept us on the prowl all year long. In kindergarten, I remember riding the cheese with all the sixth graders. These kids were smoking and making out in the back of the bus while I was only 5 years old, still watching Timmy the Tooth. Luckily, the neighbor girls, Chrissy and Lyd, looked out for me, and because of that, I sat with the older kids. Chrissy put me on the window next to Lyd and told me to keep quiet. I remember this badass kid named Stanley who was always causing trouble for the driver and bringing his new girlfriends home twice a week. He listened to metal, rode a dirt bike, and drew twisted, dark comics. That's where I first heard about Crybaby Bridge. Stanley drew a picture of a girl that looked like Samara from The Ring. The woman was standing on a railroad bridge about 50 feet up with the church in the background. He was holding her baby, but not in a loving way. She was about to drop it. It was a shocking picture, yes, but it had my attention because I've seen that place before. It was just a couple streets from my house. And from the school, our bus route is closest. And on the route, my house and Stanley's were on the nearest corner. So of course, when Stan told his stories, he always made sure the girls and I could hear. He would sing, "She killed her baby, and she killed herself. They called her crazy, she jumped to hell," over and over. I remember being so scared of the old dying sister in the original Pet Cemetery that I had to talk to my doctor about it. I still have a vivid memory of a dream of her chasing me around the tree we used to wait for the school bus at. Looking back, it probably had something to do with the real-life terror right down the railroad. My bed would shake at night while the train rode by, and I couldn't tell if I was awake or dreaming, shivering scared of this demon lady. That shit still gives me the creeps, typing this in a dark halfway across the country. I felt true fear for a brief moment when her character was introduced in the remake. Stan brought a couple kids that went missing a few years ago before that. He said the witch got them, or the graveyard did. Either way, they went over that bridge. He called the church the graveyard because beside the church was a cemetery, and he said that's where all the real services took place. Stan told us that he went out there with his older brother, and they saw red lights inside the windows, heard baby cries before being chased off by one of the church people. He said they were always watching and are always looking for new members. Years later, my family was having a cookout with some old friends. Naturally, the campfire brought out some spooky stories. And after light as a feather, stiff as a board stories, my mom's best friend brings up the Crybaby Bridge and starts pointing toward my mom. My mom starts to embarrassingly smile and wait for Chris to get on with the story while she dies inside as the clock ticks. And what feels like a lifetime later for my mom, Chris reveals that they went out there with a couple boys in high school and parked right under the bridge. The group got out of the car, smoked a joint, wandered up the hill and through the cemetery. And when they returned to the car, it wouldn't start. And there were fingerprints all over the windows and chips in the paint of the fancy ride. Most of the party didn't believe the story, but I did. And I knew I would have to go check it out for myself. Months later was the football season. I was playing on the Browns with all my best friends. I came from the Chargers, and this was my first year playing tackle on the new team. The team was known for winning and had traditions on and off the field. At one of the first team meetings, I heard the varsity kids talking about the annual haunted house tour. They were talking about hay rides and the world famous 7 floors of hell. But I had a different suggestion. They laughed at first, but my buddy Adam from the bus was on the Browns and brought up Stan, and they shut up real quick. A couple weeks later, it was Halloween and time to get spooky. We passed out candy and headed up to Scream Park. After escaping the catacombs and the clown house, we planned on hitting a couple real haunts. We piled in the station wagon and headed to the boonies. The excitement turned into fear when we turned onto Abbeville Road. We could feel it in the air. We felt like we were at the edge of the world. All of a sudden, Richie slams on the brakes, puts the car in park, and runs out of the car with the keys in ignition. He shouts for everyone to follow him out of sight. We hesitated, but finally catch up to him after he calls again. We find him around the bend and start fussing, wondering what just happened. He shushes us and calmly walks back toward the car. All the headlights were now off, and we all started to really panic. A few seconds later, we see headlights approaching and run as fast as we can toward the car. We hopped in the first door and that we could and started screaming, "Go, go, go!" But the engine was skipping. Richie, now terrified and pumping the gas, finally gets the wagon started. He burns rubber while this huge truck comes screaming at us with its horn blaring like Jeepers Creepers. We take a quick left and turn up the hill and into the church and park near the cemetery. Adam and I look at each other and wonder what we got ourselves into. But the surreal feeling of living out a comic book kept moving us forward. We explored the exterior of the church and saw the red lights that I heard so much about. The air was filled with mist, and we followed the winding path between the graves. It felt like there were shadows and faces watching us at every turn. We dipped off into the woods until we reached the railroad tracks and headed back toward the bridge. I lost myself in a daze of walking, and the next thing I knew, there was no more ground between the railroad ties. I was about 50 feet up above the road in a thick cloud of fog. I would have never made it that far if I was paying attention. I still haven't been that far out since. The wind felt good, and sound and nature were peaceful. When I closed my eyes, I listened for the cries. But after a few seconds of serenity, my eyes began to rumble and whistling through the trees. There was something wrong, but I was frozen. There was a train coming, and I was the closest one to it. The crew's stand-by me screams came back to my consciousness, and I hustled back, trying not to plummet to my death. The conductor saw us and laid on the horn. We dove off the side about 15 feet down into the dirt and rolled back down to the street. After the roller coaster of chills and thrills, we headed back toward the car and saw something unexpected in the parking lot. It was the truck from before, but it was now empty. We looked around paranoid and ran towards the buggy. I take one last look in the church windows and scan the misty headstones before hopping in the car. Richie opens up his door, just standing there staring. We rush until we notice what's slowing him down. There was a slice of chocolate cake on a red plate with a fork sitting on the driver's seat. I didn't understand until Joey said, "Devil's cake," and Richie threw it on the ground and started the car. He peeled down the hill, and I could have sworn to see the truck's lights turn back on. I kept quiet, and we all didn't say a word until we reached town. We pulled into the drive and dapped up. Joey told us maybe next time we'll get to see Erma's house, and Richie said, "And the witch's ball too." After winning the championship that season, we never saw those guys again. But that night laid the foundation for my interest in nocturnal sightseeing. Erie Swamps, Road Trip to Eden. If you're ever in Valley City, check out the Triangle, Erma's house, the Witch's Ball, and Crybaby Bridge. But watch out, there's many people keeping an eye on you.